The classroom was quiet except for the soft scratching of pencils on paper and the faint hum of the air conditioner. It was one of those ordinary mornings where nothing seemed out of place. Students were seated in rows, some leaning back lazily in their chairs, others hunched over their notebooks, lost in thought. At the far corner of the room, a young woman sat quietly. She didn't speak much, and most people hardly noticed her. Her books were stacked neatly in front of her, and her gaze was calm, almost distant, as if she were somewhere else entirely. Her presence was subtle, unassuming, but there was something in the way she held herself that quietly demanded respect, even if no one realized it. Across the room, a boy in the middle row was shifting in his seat. He had a loud, brash personality, the kind that made him the center of attention without even trying. He thrived on reaction. If people laughed at his jokes or trembled at his teasing, it fueled him. Today he seemed restless. His eyes kept darting toward the quiet girl, and a smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. He was the kind of person who never let a moment pass without leaving his mark on it, even if it hurt someone else. The teacher, a woman with patient eyes and a calm voice, was explaining the lesson, but the boy wasn't listening. His mind was already spinning a plan to get a reaction from the girl. He had been watching her for weeks, noticing how she avoided conflict, how she never raised her voice, how she remained polite even when provoked. To him, that quietness was not strength but weakness. He didn't see her composure as dignity. He saw it as an opportunity. He leaned back in his chair, pretending to stretch, then slowly slid toward her side of the room. The other students were busy with their work, the hum of pens and papers masking the tension building between them. He paused just behind her, watching her turn a page in her notebook, completely unaware of the storm approaching. For a moment, the boy's eyes flicked with mischief, a dangerous spark that was almost invisible but could not be ignored. He was about to do something that, in his mind, would be a joke, something that would make him the hero of his own story in front of his classmates. But he didn't consider the consequences. He didn't pause to think about how a single action could change everything in a heartbeat. As his hand reached forward, the girl shifted slightly, sensing something off, but not enough to react. She had grown used to moments of discomfort, subtle digs, and whispered comments. Most of the time she ignored them, letting people reveal their character through their own actions. Today, however, the tension felt different. It wasn't just teasing, it carried a sense of danger, of unpredictability, something sharper than usual. Then it happened. In a flash of movement, the boy's hand was on her, pushing in a way that was meant to startle, meant to provoke laughter from the surrounding students. The sound of her sudden gasp cut through the quiet of the classroom, drawing the attention of a few nearby students who had been caught up in their own work. For a moment, the boy's smirk widened, convinced he had succeeded, but what he didn't anticipate was her reaction. In the few seconds that followed, the girl's eyes narrowed, not in fear but in focused awareness. There was a calm intensity in her gaze, a strength that had been quietly building over years of handling situations just like this. In those moments, it was as if time slowed. The other students seemed to freeze, sensing the shift in energy. The room, once filled with ordinary sounds, now felt charged, as though it were holding its breath. The boy suddenly realized something was wrong. The joke he had thought harmless was no longer playful in any sense. He felt a sharp, unexpected resistance, a force that caught him completely off guard. His confidence wavered, and for the first time he sensed vulnerability in himself. The girl's quietness had never been weakness, and now he understood that his actions had underestimated her completely. A few students whispered among themselves, unsure of what to do, but unable to look away. The teacher finally noticed the commotion and quickly moved toward the scene, her voice firm and commanding, trying to restore control. But the boy's smug expression had vanished, replaced by confusion and fear. He was trapped in a moment he had not anticipated, caught off balance by a reaction he could not manipulate. The girl's posture remained composed, but there was a shift in her presence. It was subtle yet unmistakable. In those few seconds, she had reclaimed control, transforming a moment of vulnerability into a display of quiet power. Her eyes locked onto his, and he could see the seriousness there, the unwavering certainty that she would not be treated lightly, that she would not be a punchline to someone else's amusement. The classroom seemed to hold its breath. The other students felt it too. The sudden tension, the reversal of roles, the boy who had been bold now shrinking under the weight of unexpected authority. The teacher's footsteps grew closer and the boy's panic began to rise. He realized that the joke had gone too far, that he had misread the room, and that the consequences of his actions were about to unfold. It was in that suspended moment that the boy experienced a rare and humbling realization. For all his bravado and teasing, he had never encountered someone who met aggression with calm decisiveness. He had never been confronted with someone whose quiet nature carried a force that could not be ignored. In those 5 seconds, he understood what it meant to be powerless, to be at the mercy of a person he had assumed would react fearfully. The girl, still calm, took a small, deliberate step back, creating space between them. She did not shout. She did not cry. She simply stood, letting the weight of her presence do the work. The boy's face went pale. He tried to speak, to make a joke, to cover his embarrassment, but the words stuck in his throat. The classroom, once a backdrop for ordinary learning, had become a stage for a dramatic, unspoken lesson in courage, dignity, and respect. As the teacher arrived, her eyes immediately assessed the situation. She saw the boy's frightened expression, the girl's calm composure, and the subtle tension in the room. Her voice broke the silence, firm but controlled, demanding attention. "Is everything all right here?" she asked. The boy stammered, unable to find an excuse. The girl, composed and steady, simply nodded, indicating that she was unharmed, but her eyes communicated a clear message. The behavior would not be tolerated. The classroom slowly returned to its rhythm. Though the echoes of what had just happened lingered, some students exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the power of quiet strength. Others felt a subtle shift in the way they viewed the boy, a newfound understanding that actions, even meant as jokes, carry weight and consequence. The girl returned to her seat, her composure unbroken, as if the incident had merely been another ripple in her calm sea of patience. For the boy, however, the lesson was more profound. He sat frozen, trying to process the sudden reversal of roles. The confidence that had driven him moments before was gone, replaced by unease and a growing awareness of accountability. In that classroom, under the watchful eyes of peers and teacher alike, he experienced a taste of humility that would linger far longer than the laughter he had hoped to provoke. The remaining minutes of class passed slowly. The girl wrote in her notebook as if nothing had happened, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the boy's jittery movements. The other students quietly resumed their work, some stealing glances at the boy, noting the change in his attitude. Even the teacher's voice seemed tinged with an unspoken acknowledgement that a lesson had been learned, one that went beyond the textbooks and reached into the realm of character and human decency. As the bell rang and students began to gather their belongings, the girl packed her bag with the same quiet efficiency. Unaffected by the incident, the boy lingered for a moment, hesitant to leave, grappling with the reality that he had been confronted with the unexpected consequences of his actions. Outside the classroom, the hallways buzzed with noise, but the memory of those few seconds remained vivid, a silent reminder of the power of calm courage. Walking home that day, the girl reflected on what had happened. She didn't feel anger, only clarity. She understood the importance of standing firm, of meeting aggression with composed strength, and of asserting one's dignity without losing oneself to emotion. The boy, meanwhile, replayed the incident over and over in his mind, recognizing that a moment's thoughtlessness could shape his reputation, his relationships, and even his own sense of self. By the end of the day, it was clear that something had shifted, not only between the two students but in the classroom itself. There was a subtle respect now, an unspoken understanding that quiet confidence and dignity carry a force that cannot be ignored. And while the girl continued to be herself, reserved, polite, and thoughtful, the impact of her response had left an imprint on everyone who witnessed it, shaping the way they would perceive courage, accountability, and human strength from that day forward. After the bell rang, the classroom emptied slowly, some students lingering to chat, others rushing to their next class. The quiet girl stayed behind for a moment, gathering her books and organizing her papers with careful precision. She didn't rush, nor did she seem shaken by what had just happened. Her calm presence drew a few curious glances from classmates, some with admiration, others with barely hidden surprise. Everyone had noticed the way she had handled the situation, though most were too polite or too uncertain to comment. Meanwhile, the boy slouched in his chair, staring at the floor. He could hear the faint buzz of the hallway outside, but it seemed distant, almost like a sound coming from another world. He kept replaying the incident over and over in his mind, the feeling of being powerless gnawing at him. The embarrassment wasn't just about being caught or scolded. It was the stark realization that someone he had underestimated could respond with confidence and control that he didn't know how to confront. He had expected laughter or resistance, maybe even fear, but certainly not the quiet, commanding strength that she had shown. For the rest of the day, he couldn't focus. Every class, every lecture, even the break period seemed to be clouded by that moment. He would glance across the room, hoping she wouldn't notice him, but he could feel the weight of her presence everywhere. It wasn't a harsh presence. It wasn't aggressive. It was something subtler, something that made him aware of his own behavior and choices, something that quietly demanded respect without asking for it. That evening, he found himself walking home more slowly than usual. The streets were busy with students and commuters, but he felt alone, caught in the swirl of thoughts he couldn't escape. He thought about the way he had acted in class, about the impulsive decision that had led to humiliation. He also thought about the girl, who had faced him calmly and without a word of anger. There was a quiet dignity in her that he couldn't forget, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized how little he understood about the impact of his own actions. At home, he sat in his room, staring at the wall. The incident replayed in his mind in slow motion, each second revealing a new detail he had missed. He remembered the subtle shift in her posture, the way her eyes had met his, the faint but undeniable confidence she carried. For the first time, he saw the consequences of his behavior not as jokes or games, but as real moments that affected real people. It was a revelation he hadn't expected, and it left him unsettled. The quiet girl, on the other hand, continued her evening as she usually did. She reviewed her notes for the next day, organized her schedule, and made sure everything was in order. Despite the incident, she felt no anger, no bitterness, only clarity. She had always understood that people like the boy acted out of insecurity, ignorance, or the desire for attention. She had faced situations like this before, and her strength had always been in responding with calmness rather than reacting with emotion. That night, she reflected on the subtle power of composure, realizing once again that strength often comes not from noise or force, but from quiet confidence and self-respect. The following days at school were tense, though nothing openly hostile occurred. The boy avoided direct contact with her as much as possible, though he could not completely ignore the presence that had unsettled him so thoroughly. His friends noticed the change in his demeanor and tried to tease him about it, but even their jokes fell flat. The incident had left an imprint, a reminder that actions have consequences and that sometimes a moment of thoughtlessness could reveal a side of life he had never fully understood. Meanwhile, whispers began to circulate in the school, though cautiously. Some students admired the girl for her composure, talking quietly about how she had handled the situation with maturity and strength. Others simply observed, unsure how to react, but they too had seen a shift in the dynamic between the two students. The classroom, once a place of ordinary routine, had experienced a subtle change. There was an unspoken acknowledgement among the students that strength could come in unexpected forms, and that boldness without thought could lead to humiliation or regret. The boy began to reflect more deeply on his behavior. He remembered other times he had acted impulsively, when teasing or pushing someone had seemed funny in the moment, but left a lingering sense of discomfort afterward. He realized that he often ignored the feelings of others, assuming that everyone would react the way he wanted or expected. That day in class had been a wake-up call, a reminder that people were more than targets for his amusement, that their strength and dignity mattered, and that he had underestimated the consequences of his actions. One afternoon, the teacher asked the class to write a reflection about a moment in which they had learned something important. The boy stared at the blank page, struggling to put words to the lesson he had learned. He thought about how he had assumed control through intimidation, only to discover that someone else's quiet confidence could undo everything he thought he knew. Writing about it felt strange, almost exposing, but it also helped him begin to understand the importance of humility, awareness, and respect. The girl, meanwhile, wrote her reflection with the same calm clarity that had defined her throughout the incident. She reflected not on the act of being threatened, but on the importance of self-respect, the quiet power of composure, and the way people often learn lessons not through anger, but through understanding and patience. Her words carried thoughtfulness, insight, and a reminder that dignity does not depend on others noticing it. It exists within, unshaken by fleeting moments of chaos or aggression. Over the next week, the boy's behavior slowly began to change. He no longer sought attention through intimidation. He thought twice before making jokes at someone else's expense. He realized that the respect of others was not something he could demand through force or noise. It was earned through behavior, consideration, and the willingness to understand the impact of his actions. Though he struggled at times, the memory of that single moment in class remained a guide, a warning, and a lesson rolled into one. In the same week, the girl continued to move through her days with quiet confidence. She remained polite, considerate, and thoughtful, but her classmates could sense the depth of her presence. There was a subtle strength in her demeanor, a reminder that courage doesn't always shout. It sometimes exists in stillness, in calmness, and in the steady refusal to be undermined or diminished. The school community, too, began to shift, though quietly. Teachers noticed the boy's changed behavior, noting that he had become less impulsive, more reflective, and more considerate. Students who had once ignored the quiet girl now seemed to see her differently, not as someone to be overlooked, but as someone whose strength and presence could not be ignored. It was a ripple effect, a small but significant change in the dynamics of the classroom and beyond. At home, the boy had long conversations with his family, trying to make sense of the experience. He talked about how he had been careless, how he had underestimated people, and how the incident had made him reflect on his actions and character. His family listened, offering guidance, encouragement, and reminders that mistakes could be powerful lessons if one chose to learn from them. These conversations helped him slowly rebuild his sense of self, now tempered with humility and awareness rather than arrogance and impulsiveness. The girl, too, reflected on the broader meaning of what had happened. She thought about how courage could exist in many forms, and how sometimes the quietest people carry the deepest strength. She understood that life often presented moments of challenge, confrontation, and misunderstanding, but that responding with patience, clarity, and composure could transform difficult situations into lessons, not just for herself, but for those who witnessed them. By the end of the week, the boy and the girl passed each other in the hallways. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment there was a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken lesson. He offered a tentative nod, not as a joke or a challenge, but as recognition. She returned it with her calm, steady demeanor, not proud or boastful, simply acknowledging that the moment had passed and that lessons had been learned. Other students noticed the small exchange. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet powerful. It was a reminder that accountability, humility, and courage could exist without fanfare, that growth often happens quietly, and that strength is not always loud. It is sometimes measured in the willingness to reflect, learn, and respect others. As the days continued, the classroom atmosphere subtly improved. The boy no longer sought to dominate or provoke. The girl continued her quiet strength, and the other students felt a shift toward a more thoughtful, considerate environment. The incident became a story, not of fear or shame, but of lessons learned, growth achieved, and character revealed. By the end of the week, it was clear that something lasting had occurred. The boy had learned humility, awareness, and respect. The girl had reinforced her quiet strength and composure. The classmates had learned that courage can take many forms, that actions have consequences, and that dignity and respect are earned through behavior, not intimidation. It was a week that would linger in memory, shaping the way the students viewed themselves, each other, and the importance of thoughtful, considerate action in their daily lives. A few weeks passed since the incident in class. The quiet girl continued her life with the same routine she always had, attending her classes, quietly completing her work, and maintaining her calm presence. Yet the classroom, and even the school as a whole, felt a subtle shift. What had seemed like an ordinary space had now changed. The boy who had once been brash and loud was noticeably more reflective. He no longer sought attention through teasing or pranks, and the whispers that had once followed him had faded into respectful silence. But life is rarely without new challenges. One morning, the school announced a project that required students to work in groups. Each group would present a topic in front of the entire class. This was the first time the quiet girl would have to speak publicly. and the first time the boy would have to work alongside her. Many students sensed the tension in the room as the groups were formed, some quietly speculating how these two would interact now. The boy felt a tight knot in his stomach. Even though he had changed, the memory of that moment, the moment when he had been confronted and humbled, still lingered. He wondered if he could handle the responsibility of working with someone whose presence demanded honesty and respect. The group was assigned a topic on teamwork and communication. Ironically, it was the perfect opportunity for both of them to demonstrate growth, though neither realized how much it would test them. The quiet girl opened her notebook calmly, jotting down ideas and organizing her thoughts. She spoke softly but clearly to the group, guiding them through the planning process with patience and focus. Her quiet demeanor did not go unnoticed. The boy watched her, noticing how effortlessly she earned the attention and respect of their peers without raising her voice or demanding it. He began to feel a mixture of admiration and humility, a reminder of why the earlier incident had left such a mark on him. As they started working together, he found himself trying to contribute in ways he hadn't before. He listened more, offered ideas thoughtfully, and resisted the urge to dominate or make jokes. At first it felt strange, even uncomfortable. He had grown used to controlling situations, but now he was learning the importance of collaboration and genuine respect. The quiet girl noticed the shift, though she did not comment on it. She continued to focus on the task, treating him as a teammate rather than a source of past trouble. That simple act of impartiality helped him feel encouraged rather than judged. The group sessions were not without difficulty. Some students struggled to coordinate their schedules, while others clashed over different ideas. The boy's old impulses tried to surface at times, a sudden urge to assert dominance or make a sarcastic comment, but he caught himself, recalling the lesson he had learned weeks ago. The quiet girl's calm, steady presence was a constant anchor, reminding him that progress required patience, empathy, and self-control. Slowly, he began to understand the real meaning of teamwork, not just working together, but respecting each other, listening, and valuing contributions equally. Outside of class, the boy began reflecting on his personal growth. He realized that the incident had changed him in ways he hadn't expected. He started noticing moments where he could be kind instead of rude, considerate instead of impulsive. The quiet girl, without ever trying to influence him directly, had shown him a model of strength, dignity, and quiet leadership. Her actions had spoken louder than any lecture or advice ever could. He began to see that true strength is not measured by attention or fear, but by respect, thoughtfulness, and composure. Meanwhile, the quiet girl continued to maintain her routine. She remained aware of the boy's efforts, noting his small but meaningful changes. She had always believed that people learn through experience more than words, and she realized that the earlier incident had created an opportunity for him to reflect deeply. She felt a quiet satisfaction, not in seeing him humbled, but in witnessing the growth that came from understanding and accountability. Her presence had been a catalyst, but the change itself was his own. As the project deadline approached, tensions in the group occasionally flared, though never in a harmful way. Disagreements arose over ideas, presentation methods, and responsibilities, but they were handled with a level of maturity the group had not seen before. The boy contributed actively, often suggesting ways to improve ideas instead of criticizing them. The quiet girl guided discussions patiently, balancing input from all group members. By the time they were ready to present, the group had not only completed the project but had also learned valuable lessons about collaboration, leadership, and mutual respect. The day of the presentation arrived, and the classroom was filled with students, teachers, and the soft murmur of anticipation. When it was their group's turn, the quiet girl stood at the front, her posture calm and confident. The boy stood beside her, aware of the audience but no longer nervous or defensive. He had learned to trust the process, to trust his teammate, and to rely on his own ability to contribute constructively. Together, they delivered their presentation clearly and thoughtfully, demonstrating a level of cohesion and respect that impressed everyone in the room. During the presentation, the boy felt a surge of genuine pride, not pride in being dominant or attention-seeking, but pride in growth, in learning how to work respectfully and effectively with others. He glanced at the quiet girl, who smiled softly at him, a subtle acknowledgement of effort and teamwork. It was a quiet, meaningful exchange, a reminder that mutual respect and understanding often speak louder than words. Their classmates noticed too, some nodding in approval, others quietly impressed by the transformation in the boy and the calm leadership of the quiet girl. After the presentation, the teacher praised the group, highlighting not just the content of their work but the way they had conducted themselves. She remarked on the importance of communication, cooperation, and respect, noting how the group had demonstrated these qualities in both planning and execution. The boy listened attentively, feeling the truth in her words, understanding that this recognition was not about his past behavior, but about the growth he had achieved. The quiet girl accepted the praise with her usual grace, her composure highlighting the quiet strength that had influenced her teammate and peers. Later that day, the boy walked home alone, reflecting on the lessons of the past few weeks. He understood that change was not instantaneous, that growth required effort, awareness, and humility. He thought about the earlier incident, the moment in class when he had been confronted and humbled, and realized that it had been the starting point for a deeper understanding of himself and others. The quiet girl had not sought revenge, nor had she boasted about her strength. She had simply been herself, and that had been enough to inspire reflection and transformation. The quiet girl also reflected on the week's events. She thought about the subtle ways in which people influence each other, sometimes without realizing it. She understood that true leadership is often quiet, patient, and steady, and that the impact of one's actions can ripple outward in ways that are not immediately visible. The boy's growth was a reminder of the potential for positive change, and she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that patience, composure, and integrity can inspire others more effectively than confrontation or aggression. Over the next few weeks, the boy continued to change. He became more considerate toward classmates, more reflective about his words and actions, and more aware of the feelings of others. He learned that respect is earned, not demanded, and that strength is measured not by dominance but by understanding, patience, and empathy. The quiet girl continued her routine, serving as a steady example of composure, focus, and dignity. Their relationship remained respectful and cooperative, built on mutual understanding rather than fear or intimidation. The classroom, too, began to reflect this shift. Students observed the boy's transformation, noticing that the environment was calmer and more supportive. Instances of teasing or dominance decreased, replaced by a greater sense of awareness and respect. The teacher observed the change as well, noting that the incident had sparked a ripple effect that reached far beyond the initial confrontation. It was a lesson in human growth, accountability, and the quiet power of influence. One afternoon, the boy found himself thinking about the incident in class again. He realized that he had learned more from being humbled than from any praise or success. He understood the importance of listening, observing, and respecting others, and he felt a newfound commitment to act thoughtfully in all situations. The quiet girl had not needed to speak much to teach this lesson. Her calm strength, integrity, and composure had been sufficient. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, not in a forced or performative way, but in the recognition that people can inspire growth simply by being themselves. As the school year progressed, their relationship evolved into one of mutual respect. The boy no longer saw her as someone to challenge or provoke. He saw her as a person whose character and presence commanded attention naturally. The quiet girl remained her usual composed self, aware of her own influence but never exploiting it. Together they demonstrated to their classmates the importance of accountability, integrity, and calm leadership. The incident that had once been a moment of fear and tension had transformed into a foundation for growth, learning, and personal development. By the end of the term, the boy's classmates noticed the difference in him. He was no longer the brash, attention-seeking student who had caused disruption. He had become thoughtful, reflective, and considerate, earning the quiet respect of peers and teachers alike. The quiet girl's example had been a catalyst, but the real change came from within him, the recognition of his past mistakes and the effort to grow beyond them. The incident in class, once a moment of tension and fear, had become a turning point, shaping his character and perspective for the better. Weeks turned into months, and the school environment continued to shift subtly. The quiet girl maintained her routine, moving through her classes with calm composure, observing, listening, and quietly influencing those around her. She had long since moved past the incident that had shocked the classroom, but its echoes remained, not in fear but in respect. The boy, now markedly different, continued to work on himself, determined to live with the lessons he had learned rather than revert to old habits. Yet life has a way of testing even the strongest growth. And a new challenge was approaching, one that would push both of them to their limits and reveal the true strength of their character. One morning, a school assembly was announced. The principal requested the presence of certain students for recognition in academics and leadership. The boy and the girl were among those called, and while the boy initially felt nervous, he also recognized it as an opportunity to face a larger audience, not as a performance but as a chance to demonstrate what he had learned. The quiet girl, calm and composed as ever, walked to the assembly with an even stride, her focus steady and determined. She was aware that being in the spotlight could bring attention, but she did not seek it. She simply accepted her place, knowing that respect is earned through presence and integrity, not noise or arrogance. As they entered the auditorium, the atmosphere was buzzing with students, teachers, and parents. The boy felt the familiar knot in his stomach, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. He glanced at the quiet girl, who met his gaze briefly with a small, reassuring nod. It wasn't pity or encouragement, it was acknowledgement. It reminded him that he was responsible for his own actions and presence, and that he needed to face this moment with honesty and composure. The principal began speaking, praising students who had demonstrated leadership, teamwork, and growth throughout the year. When it came time for the boy and the quiet girl to be recognized, a hush fell over the room. The boy felt the familiar tension of being observed, of having his actions judged, yet this time it was different. He remembered the incident in class, the lesson of humility, and the countless hours of reflection and growth. He realized that this moment was not about fear or embarrassment. It was about demonstrating the transformation he had worked hard to achieve. The quiet girl stepped forward first, her movements calm and deliberate. She received her recognition with grace, her eyes scanning the room briefly before focusing on a neutral point ahead. She spoke softly when given a chance to say a few words, expressing gratitude for the support of her teachers and peers, and sharing a thoughtful reflection on the importance of patience, respect, and quiet leadership. Her words were simple yet powerful, resonating with students and adults alike. The boy watched, feeling a mix of admiration and inspiration. He realized again how strength could exist in subtlety, and how influence could be profound without ever demanding attention. When it was the boy's turn, he took a deep breath. He approached the stage with a sense of purpose, not arrogance. He had learned that recognition meant little if it wasn't paired with integrity and growth. He spoke briefly, honestly acknowledging his past mistakes, reflecting on the lessons he had learned, and expressing gratitude for those who had influenced his transformation. His voice was steady, his posture confident but not boastful. The room responded not with laughter or criticism, but with a quiet respect that surprised him. He realized that honesty, accountability, and humility carry a weight far greater than loud gestures or displays of bravado. As he stepped down from the stage, he noticed the quiet girl's eyes on him, calm and steady. There was no judgment, no superiority, just acknowledgement. It was a silent validation that the growth he had worked for was real, that the lessons he had learned were understood, and that respect was mutual. He felt a sense of relief, but also a deeper understanding of how far he had come. It wasn't just about being recognized by the school. It was about being able to recognize himself as someone capable of change, reflection, and integrity. After the assembly, life returned to its usual rhythm, but the impact of the event lingered. The boy's classmates noticed the shift, recognizing the genuine growth he had achieved. They no longer saw him as the brash, attention-seeking student of the past. Instead, they observed someone who had faced his shortcomings, reflected deeply, and emerged stronger, more thoughtful and considerate. The quiet girl continued to move through her routine with her steady presence, reinforcing the lesson that influence does not always shout, and strength does not always demand recognition. Despite the positive changes, challenges persisted. Not all students were quick to change, and occasional conflicts arose. One afternoon, a small group of classmates began teasing another student who was shy and quiet, using humor that could easily have escalated into harm. The boy noticed immediately. He felt the familiar stirrings of his old impulses, laughter, the urge to join in, to assert dominance, but he remembered the lessons he had learned. Instead of laughing, he stepped forward, calmly but firmly addressing the group. His voice was steady, not angry, but resolute. He reminded them of the importance of respect, empathy, and accountability. The quiet girl nearby observed the interaction without interrupting. Her presence alone reinforced the seriousness of the moment. The group hesitated, uncertain how to respond. The boy continued, speaking from experience, sharing how past mistakes and impulsive behavior can hurt others and leave lasting consequences. By the end of the conversation, the group had retreated, and the student being teased was left unharmed, feeling a subtle sense of support and validation. It was a quiet victory, not celebrated, but deeply meaningful. This incident reinforced the boy's understanding of leadership and responsibility. He realized that true strength is not demonstrated through power or intimidation, but through action, courage, and thoughtful intervention. The quiet girl's influence had been a catalyst, but the boy's growth allowed him to apply the lessons in real-life situations, helping others and reinforcing the values he had learned. The school itself began to feel different. Students became more aware of their actions. Teachers noticed subtle improvements in behavior, and the overall environment shifted toward respect and consideration. As the school year progressed, another challenge emerged. The annual talent showcase was approaching, and students were encouraged to participate in activities that demonstrated their skills and creativity. The boy had never been involved in these events before. He had always preferred to stay in the background, either fearful of failure or disinterested in attention. This year, however, he felt a subtle urge to step forward, not for recognition, but to face his own limitations, to challenge himself, and to test the confidence he had been developing. The quiet girl, as always, was calm and focused. She had been preparing a presentation for the showcase, confident in her skills but unconcerned about applause or recognition. She moved with purpose, guiding others, helping students refine their ideas and providing subtle encouragement where needed. The boy observed her, learning not through instruction but through observation. He realized again that quiet confidence is often more powerful than loud gestures, and that leadership comes not from asserting dominance, but from supporting and empowering others. The day of the showcase arrived, and the boy stepped onto the stage for his first public performance. His heart raced, but he focused on the lessons he had learned: composure, honesty, and calm confidence. The audience watched, some curious, some skeptical, but all attentive. He performed without arrogance or pretense, applying the growth and awareness he had cultivated over months of reflection and experience. By the end, the applause was genuine, not mocking or exaggerated. He felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not for recognition, but for overcoming fear, self-doubt, and the shadows of his past behavior. The quiet girl watched from the audience, her calm smile a quiet acknowledgement of his effort and growth. She had never doubted his potential, but she recognized that his courage to face the stage represented a meaningful transformation. The boy realized that growth is not just about avoiding mistakes, it's about facing challenges, acknowledging past behavior, and taking steps to become a better version of oneself. After the showcase, both students returned to their normal routines, but the school community had noticed the changes. The boy had become a symbol of growth, reflection, and accountability. The quiet girl remained a symbol of composure, patience, and subtle influence. Together, their story had quietly transformed the environment around them, demonstrating that even small moments, a confrontation, a calm response, or a thoughtful intervention, can create ripples that affect many lives. By the end of Part 4, it was clear that both students had reached a turning point. The boy had faced challenges, acknowledged mistakes, and demonstrated real growth. The quiet girl had continued to influence through calm presence, reinforcing the lessons of patience, dignity, and strength. Their journey was far from over, but the foundations were firmly in place. The next step would test their character even further, bringing them to the emotional and moral climax of the story. The school year was nearing its end, and the air felt charged with anticipation. Students were busy with final projects, exams, and preparations for end-of-year events. The quiet girl continued her steady routine, focused on her studies, her commitments, and her subtle leadership among peers. She had long since moved past the incident that had once shaken the classroom, yet she carried the lessons of patience, calm, and dignity with her every day. The boy, now markedly different from the student who had humiliated himself weeks before, walked through the hallways with a quiet confidence. He no longer sought attention or approval through brash behavior. Instead, he had learned to observe, reflect, and act thoughtfully. Yet he could feel the weight of expectation building within him. The memory of the moment in class, the fear, the shock, the lesson still lingered. It was not a source of shame, but a compass, guiding him through each choice and action. One afternoon, the school announced a debate competition. The event would require students to speak in front of the entire school, defending their positions on challenging topics. The boy was encouraged to participate by a teacher who had observed his growth. Initially hesitant, he eventually agreed, seeing it as a chance to challenge himself and prove not to others but to himself that he could face pressure with composure and integrity. The quiet girl, meanwhile, was assigned to another debate team, but she took it upon herself to observe and offer guidance to younger students, demonstrating her quiet influence without seeking recognition. The day of the debate arrived. The auditorium was packed with students, teachers, and parents. The energy in the room was electric. The boy felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but he also felt a sense of preparedness. He had faced challenges before, and he knew the importance of remaining calm, clear, and honest. As he stepped onto the stage, he saw the quiet girl in the audience, her presence calm but supportive, a reminder of the lessons he had learned and the growth he had achieved. The debate began, and the boy faced his opponents with focus. He listened carefully, responded thoughtfully, and maintained a calm demeanor. When the opposing team attempted to provoke him with sarcastic remarks, he did not react impulsively. Instead, he addressed their points respectfully, turning potential conflict into an opportunity for clarity and understanding. The audience noticed the difference in him. This was not a student seeking attention or trying to dominate. This was a student who had learned the value of integrity, composure, and reasoned argument. Meanwhile, the quiet girl observed from her seat. She did not interfere, but her calm presence seemed to ripple through the room. Other students glanced at her occasionally, noting the way she carried herself, unflustered, composed, and quietly influential. She had always understood that the most powerful lessons are often learned indirectly, through example and observation, rather than instruction. Her influence on the boy had been subtle, but it had shaped the way he responded under pressure, demonstrating the profound impact of steady, consistent presence. As the debate progressed, the boy faced his toughest challenge yet. One of the opposing team members made a pointed comment about past incidents in the school, attempting to unsettle him. For a brief moment, the old tension returned. He could feel the familiar stirrings of fear and defensiveness. But then he remembered the quiet girl's lesson. Strength does not lie in reacting with anger or fear, but in remaining composed, thoughtful, and measured. He took a deep breath, responded calmly, and redirected the conversation to focus on the topic at hand. The audience was captivated, sensing both his confidence and his growth. By the time the debate ended, it was clear that the boy had transformed. He had faced challenges that would have once overwhelmed him and had responded with integrity, intelligence, and calm composure. The judges praised his ability to remain focused, respectful, and articulate, highlighting the difference between impulsive behavior and thoughtful leadership. The quiet girl's team also performed well, her guidance having strengthened their preparation and confidence. Together, their presence had elevated the standard of the competition, showing the entire school the power of composure, respect, and accountability. After the debate, students and teachers gathered in the hallway to discuss the event. Many were impressed by the boy's growth, noting the stark contrast between the impulsive student of weeks ago and the composed, confident young man who had just faced the debate stage. Some students who had once teased or underestimated him offered quiet congratulations, recognizing the genuine change in his character. The boy felt a mix of humility and pride. He had not sought recognition, but he understood that his growth was visible to others, and that accountability and reflection had truly reshaped him. The quiet girl approached him afterward, her expression calm but encouraging. "You did well," she said softly. There was no judgment, no condescension, only acknowledgement. The boy nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He realized again that her influence had never been about control or dominance. She had simply demonstrated through her own composure and integrity what strength looks like. Her example had guided him, and her acknowledgement now confirmed that his efforts were genuine and meaningful. Over the next few days, the boy continued to reflect on his journey. He thought about the initial incident in class, the humiliation, and the fear he had felt. He realized that moment had been the catalyst for months of growth, reflection, and personal development. He thought about the choices he had made, the lessons he had learned, and the challenges he had faced. Each experience had reinforced a single truth. True strength is measured not by how loudly one asserts themselves, but by how thoughtfully, calmly, and respectfully one navigates challenges. The quiet girl, meanwhile, continued her daily routine with serene focus. She did not seek recognition, but she understood the impact of her presence. She had witnessed the boy's transformation, not as a source of pride or triumph, but as a confirmation that patience, composure, and quiet leadership can inspire change. She also reflected on her own journey, realizing that sometimes the most profound influence comes from simply being consistent, thoughtful, and true to oneself. As the school year drew to a close, the boy and the quiet girl were recognized by the principal once more, not for a single achievement, but for their overall growth, leadership, and influence. The boy had transformed from a student who relied on impulsive behavior for attention into someone capable of thoughtful leadership and meaningful action. The quiet girl had remained a constant presence, guiding by example and demonstrating that strength and influence do not require loud gestures or dramatic displays. During the final assembly, the principal addressed the student body, highlighting the lessons of growth, reflection, and accountability. He spoke of the importance of recognizing mistakes, learning from them, and striving to become a better version of oneself. The boy and the quiet girl sat together, listening with quiet attention. The boy felt a deep sense of closure, understanding that the journey from impulsiveness to maturity had been both challenging and rewarding. He had faced fear, embarrassment, and doubt, but he had emerged stronger, more thoughtful, and more capable of leading with integrity. The quiet girl, seated beside him, smiled softly, not in triumph, but in quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had shared in parallel. Her presence reminded him that influence is often subtle, that patience and composure can create lasting change, and that true growth comes from within, guided by reflection, accountability, and courage. The boy realized that he had been fortunate to witness and experience such influence firsthand, and that the lessons learned would stay with him far beyond the school year. After the assembly, students mingled, exchanged stories, and reflected on the year. The boy and the quiet girl walked through the hallways, their conversation simple but meaningful. They spoke of projects, of challenges, and of lessons learned. There was no need to revisit the past incident. It had served its purpose. Instead, they focused on the future, aware that growth and integrity are lifelong pursuits. The boy felt a sense of calm confidence, knowing that he had changed for the better, and that he had the tools to continue growing, learning, and influencing others positively. The final days of school were filled with reflection and preparation for the summer. The boy and the quiet girl continued to excel, not because they sought attention, but because they had learned the value of persistence, focus, and integrity. The boy's peers recognized the transformation, many seeking advice or guidance, and he found himself sharing insights he had learned through experience. The quiet girl continued to inspire subtly, offering encouragement, modeling composure, and demonstrating that strength does not require demonstration. It is evident through action, thoughtfulness, and integrity. By the end of the school year, the story of the initial classroom incident had become more than just a memory. It had become a lesson for everyone who had witnessed it.